Welcome, believers. Welcome, you wonderfully weird people. Welcome to UFO, aliens and weird stuff. Right, so today then, I want to talk about something a bit freaky. Right, there is something deeply unsettling about a ghost. Right, for me personally, I'd be terrified. Right, not just the idea of seeing one, but the assumption behind it. Because when most people think of ghosts, they imagine the dead. Sadly, all right, sadly. A person who once lived, breathed, existed, but now somehow still present. Right? It's a bit spooky. But what if the idea is wrong? Bear with me on this one, right? What if some of the things we see moving in the dark, appearing without warning and vanishing without explanation, was never alive to begin with, right? Because when you look closely at the evidence, at the accounts, at the details people often overlook, a very different picture begins to emerge, right? Now, bear with me on this one, and I am referring to what I would call inanimate objects, right? How can they be ghosts? Inanimate objects, right? So I'll give you an example, right? The ship that returned from nowhere. This is quite a famous one, right? In the early 1700s, a ship set sail from America, bound for England. Now, it was a routine journey, if there's such a thing as that in those days, crewed by experienced sailors carrying cargo across the Atlantic. But sadly, it never arrived. So weeks passed, then months, no wreckage, sadly no survivors as far as we can ascertain, no message carried by the tide, so there was no debris washed up. Just silence. Now, in those days, the sea was unpredictable. Same as it is today, really. Ships vanished. Storms swallowed them whole. And so eventually, this ship was added to the long list of the lost. Now, until something impossible happened, right? So months later, at the very port where it had departed, people began to gather. So dock workers, sailors, men who knew the ship better than anyone, they were all staring upwards. And at first it made no sense, right? Then slowly the shape became clear. Now high above them, in the clouds, in the sky, far beyond where anything solid should be, was this ship. It was materialising up in the clouds. The same ship, suspended in the sky. Apparently this is true, right? Every mast intact, every line visible, as though it had never been lost at all. It didn't move like a cloud, and it didn't drift like smoke. It simply hung there, sitting there in the sky, silent, still. And then, right, without warning, it seems to be reenacting the storm it got lost in. It began to tilt, as if caught in a storm that no one on the ground could feel. The hull leaned, the masts shifted, a violent motion was playing out in complete silence. And then it was gone. It just vanished. No crash, no sound, no debris, obviously. Just nothing, just an empty sky. What makes you wonder, right? Where did it come from? Okay? What was it doing there? This wasn't a spirit, was it? It wasn't a ghost. It can't be. It's an inanimate object. But it was ghostly and it did appear. Now, obviously, this story is a little bit mad. And some people might think, yeah, that's rubbish. I don't believe it. But remember the city that appeared in the clouds, and I'll put it there. Remember that? That kind of does, should we say, concrete the fact that it could have happened, eh? Right, so what is an inanimate object doing as a ghost? Right? Was it a ghost or was it something else? Now, years later, in 1930s London, another incident began to emerge, and I love this story, right, because there's loads of witnesses. At a quiet junction in North Kensington, drivers approached with caution It was a blind corner and very difficult to navigate, right? And it was prone to accidents. But the crashes that began happening there come with a strange explanation. I mean, you try telling your insurance company this, right? Drivers all told the same story. If you drive there late at night when the roads were empty, right, they saw headlights coming. And they saw headlights coming fast. In fact, too fast for the bend to take. And it was always a red double-decker bus with route number 7 on it. And it raced towards them out of the darkness, right? Lights blazing on both decks. Now, obviously, as a driver, you react instinctively, right? You swerve, and they did do. Some mounted pavements. Some actually crashed outright, trying to avoid this double-decker bus and the impact. But there was never any collision. That's the weird thing, because just before contact, the bus disappeared. It just vanished, right? One man later described it in detail. He saw it quite clearly. He says he was close enough to make out everything, but there was something wrong, and at first he couldn't put his finger on it, right? Then, right, what dawned on him was there was no driver, no passengers, just an empty vehicle moving at speed. Now, as reports increased, more witnesses come forward. Some claim they saw it pass them in the street. Others insisted it moved through the junction repeatedly. One transport worker even claimed that when he was working in the depot late at night, he see it pull in, right? He said it stopped and the engine just idled. Now, he described it, he said, as if it was waiting to pick up passengers. And then it vanished. Now, the sightings stopped, right, as quickly as they started. And they stopped after the road layout was changed. And the phenomenon never returned. So why did a bus appear as a ghost? All right, as I say, an inanimate object, right, appearing as a ghost doesn't make sense, does it, right? But it doesn't just stop with ships and buses, right? This phenomenon is worldwide. I mean, you've got cars, trains, anything you can think of, right? On a long, empty highway, drivers have reported seeing something just as disturbing, right? Vehicles that should not be there. And it's always late at night on isolated stretches of road where no traffic should really exist at that time of night. Headlights appear in the distance, right? At first, as you would imagine, if you're driving the car, you don't think nothing's unusual, just another car. But as it draws closer, something feels wrong, right? The light is too bright for a start. The light is too steady, as if it's not going over bumps, you know? It's not feeling all the ruts in the road. Too smooth, shall we say. Some witnesses say the vehicles begin to glow, faintly at first, then unmistakably, you know, as if they've got, I don't know, radioactive paint, right? Others describe something even more unsettling. Cars that are not quite solid, shapes that seem transparent, as if they are only partially there. And then, just as suddenly as they appear, they vanish, right? So no turns, no forks in the road, no braking, no sounds fading into the distance, just an empty road. 1 minute there, next minute gone. Now, some of these sightings feel almost deliberate. In one of the most famous accounts, drivers have reported picking up a hitchhiker. Every town has this sort of story. A lone figure on a deserted road. They stop, the passenger gets in, speaks normally, gives an address. Nothing unusual, nothing that would make you suspect anything until they arrive, because when they turn to speak, the passenger's gone. Right? Now that is your typical ghost, right? Because he's human, right? No door opening, no sound, no trace that anyone was ever there, just an empty seat. And the lingering feeling, obviously, that they were never ever alone. Now there are trucks. Now trucks, can you imagine seeing a ghost truck, massive, lumen shapes in the darkness? Witnesses describe them barreling down the road at impossible speeds, engines roaring, lights blazing, forcing drivers to swerve, to brace for impact. Can you imagine that? Only for the truck to vanish before it ever hits anything, before the collision, leaving nothing behind, right? No sound, obviously, there's never any sound, no damage because the truck wasn't there, just confusion and obviously a little bit of fear. Now some believe that these are echoes of tragedy, moments burned into the road where lives were lost suddenly, violently, and they're replaying over and over again. Others suggest something different, that intense emotion, and I am going to buy this actually, that intense emotion, that shock, that fear leaves an imprint on reality itself. That sounds great to me. And under the right conditions, that imprint becomes visible, a kind of recording played back without warning. But look, there is a problem with both explanations because these vehicles don't always repeat exactly, right? They change and they appear in different forms at different times, if the stories are true, right? And sometimes they interact, which raises a far more unsettling possibility, right? Whatever these things are, they are not just memories, but even the open road is not the only place where these things appear, because deep beneath cities and across long forgotten rail lines, there are reports of something else, something heavier, right? Something much, much louder and far harder to ignore. Trains, right? And these are famous, right? Not just sounds in the distance, not just vibrations through the ground, but full trains. And I'll tell you this story, right? Seen, heard, if you can imagine that, and then vanished, gone, simply gone. So they've seen the train, they've heard the train, and then bonk, it's gone. So in London, beneath the streets, within the tunnels of the underground, there have been reports stretching back decades, and it's always late at night when platforms are empty, when the last scheduled train has long since passed. People have heard it first. A low rumble, right? A low rumble, you know, that rumble, distant at first, then growing louder, the unmistakable sound of a train approaching. Wind begins to move through the tunnel, dust lifts from the platform edge, and then lights appear. Bearing in mind this is a ghost train, faint at first, then bright, a train emerging from the darkness. You know, but like everything, there is something wrong. The shape is older, the design is unfamiliar. Now it's not quite matching any modern carriage. So, and as it pulls into the station, witnesses describe something more unsettling. The passengers sitting inside this train are perfectly still, dressed in clothing from another time. Hats, coats, you know, attire, styles long since disappeared. No movement in the train, no conversation, but just silent figures facing forward. I mean, that's quite terrifying, isn't it, right? And then, before the train fully stops, it vanishes. Now, what's that all about, right? I mean, if these stories are true, why is there a ghost train? It's not departing, it's not accelerating away, it's just vanished, leaving only the empty platform and the echo of something that should not exist. And it's not just London, all right? It isn't, right? It's across the world. Similar stories emerge. Now, are these folklores? Are they simply not true? Or are people witnessing something simply out this world? In Japan, there are accounts of ghostly trains seen on a quiet line. On nights when the thick fog settles over the tracks, witnesses describe the same pattern. A train appearing where none should be, moving silently through the mist, carrying with it an overwhelming sense of unease, as if something is deeply wrong. Passengers who have seen it often struggle to describe exactly what they felt, only that it wasn't just fear, it was something a lot heavier, like standing too close to something that doesn't belong in the world. And in the United States, another story persists. Along railway tracks in San Antonio, Texas, there are reports of a man. Now this is your typical ghost, standing alone in the darkness, holding a lantern. Now all witnesses says he doesn't move much, he simply stands and raises his lantern, as if signalling, as if warning. Now the story that goes that way, well, the story goes that he was once a brakeman, killed in a tragic accident on those very tracks, and now his presence remains, appearing to oncoming trains as though trying to prevent the same fate from happening again. What a beautiful story. Now witnesses claim to have seen him clearly, the lantern swinging gently, the light cutting through the darkness, and then, just like everything else, he simply disappears. By now though, the pattern is impossible to ignore. You know, what is it about these inanimate objects that make them appear as ghosts, right? So we've got ships, we've got buses. Now that bus is a great story. We've got cars, we've got trucks. So look, some of these could be just folklore. Some, but not all. And now we've got trains. Now for centuries, we've called these things ghosts. But that explanation doesn't hold, because these things are not people. They were never actually alive, and they are not aware. So what are they? What are these ghostly cars and ships? Right, so there is another idea, and I'm going to go on a tangent here, right? One that doesn't come from folklore, but from modern thinking. Right, the possibility that reality itself is not what it seems. And do you know what? As I see more and more stuff, I'm starting to buy this theory, right? That everything we experience is a part of a system, a constructed world, a simulation. An idea explored in the Matrix, but taken seriously by philosophers and scientists. Now, if that were true, then these apparitions, should we call them, would not be spirits, they would be something else entirely. Should we call them like glitches? Glitches in the Matrix, that's a famous thing now, and I'll read that everywhere. Fragments of data repeating when they shouldn't. Moments that didn't fully disappear. That would explain the repetition, the emptiness, the lack of awareness. Because let's face it, these things, they're not alive. The ship, the cars, the bus, my favourite one, right? They are not dead. They are simply left behind. So what do you think? It's mad, isn't it, right? It's mad. I really do genuinely love these stories. So maybe ghosts, not all, but some, are not the dead. Maybe they are echoes, or, and I hate to say it, errors of something left behind when reality fails. And if that is true, then not everything you see belongs here. You know, we're talking about dimensional beings. Maybe they're dimensional beings. I mean, I'm going to do a video about shadow men, because that's proper scary. But look, this is UFO, aliens and weird stuff. I really appreciate you watching to the end. And some things have no soul at all. Let's face it, all different, all separate. And yet, or behaving in the same way. They appear, the ship in the sky, the bus on the road, they move. Obviously cars were avoiding it, and then they vanish without interaction, without explanation as well, right? As if they are not truly here but something else. What do you think? That's mad, isn't it? Alright, well look, this was UFO Aliens and Weird Stuff. I appreciate you sticking around. Please like, subscribe to my YouTube channel if you can. That would be fantastic. And maybe then next week let's talk about the Shadow Men, if I've got the courage. Don't like talking about it. It's like cattle mutilation. I don't really like talking about that either. But it is certainly worth looking into, because if you believe in UFOs like I do, massive UFO fan, then you've got to face the facts that some of it's quite scary. Cattle mutilation is definitely one of them. Alien abduction is the other. Right? Now, I believe in alien abductions. I genuinely do. And I don't think I could cope with it. But hey, look, that's a subject for another time, and I will catch you later. Thanks very much.